All right, welcome back, everyone. Grassroots is back on air and continuing with talking about the Crystal Palace.
Going back to where we left off, the meeting on October 2nd was to consider application for substantial amendment, 312 East Hyman, also known as the Crystal Palace, formerly. The proposal from the applicant, again, in public comment this evening, you heard lots of discussion about the west wall with the mural. I can talk more about that wall and its legacy and how we got to this point. If council has any questions about that, we could also wait to see if council wants to call it up and talk about that more next time. But it was really the hinge of the desire to sort of facilitate the discussion on this, and that wall is complicated and has a complicated history, has a complicated relationship to the new construction. Obviously, the mural is iconic and has a lot of importance to the community, and so the treatment of that had certainly been a point of difficulty for the applicant and also for staff. There was a revised architectural design for the entire building that changed in some significant ways some of the things that were part of the 2017 approval. And then there were some minor changes that were proposed to the roof design, alley facade, and interior programming. Just to be a little clear about what staff had intended that evening to be, because I do think it's important to HPC's eventual decision, we had recommended a continuation to a date certain of November 13th, encouraging HPC to give direction to the applicant about what they wanted to see from the project moving forward. Leading up to this, and to be frank, there were aspects of the proposal that as staff looked at it, what was proposed in terms of its relationship to the HPC design guidelines, we were likely going to need to recommend denial, not because the proposal was offensive to us, but it was in conflict with design guidelines and review criteria that we thought were applicable to what was being proposed in the project. We had been working actively with the applicant to try to land on a place where we could agree and move forward. And so there was some intentionality going into the HPC discussion of not providing a resolution, not providing staff responses to review criteria, and really hoping that meeting to be a topic of direction to the applicant to be able to then come back on the November 13th with a more formal recommendation and a resolution that we could move forward with. At the October 2nd meeting, HPC, after significant discussion and presentations by staff and the applicant, moved to approve the application as submitted. The motion was seconded and approved 4-3. So what does this mean? We don't have a resolution that is very typical for HPC decisions of this type. In staff's view, not to be trite, this means that the application as submitted is approved without question. That was what how the motion was made, and the majority voted in support of that. This is unusual. Going back into Aspen's past, there are HPC and P&Z and council approvals where you can find no record of the approvals other than in the minutes to those meetings. And so it's certainly not something that we encourage, but there is a precedent for this, although unusual and hasn't been happening recently. What this also means is that elements of the proposal within the application were not vetted through applicable review criteria. Typical conditions of approval were not included, and requests for more information are not reflected in the approval. So what was, how did the sort of application, very briefly, and I don't, we can talk about this to the degree that council wants to give clarity about what was approved, but these two images are the two primary, most visible facades of the building and what was approved in that 2017 HPC previous approval, in which the building permit that the partially completed building is in response to. On the south facade, this area over on the left of the building, if you'll notice, had a particular reference in terms of fenestration and some of the proportions to an existing facade of the previous Crystal Palace. When the previous Crystal Palace when the redevelopment was approved, there was some assumption that there were elements of the south facade that were also historic and were going to be approved and part of the what the original approval sort of ended up being. But then as construction progressed, it was pretty clear, much like the west wall, that the historic integrity of those elements were also in question. And there was approval granted to demolish that south facade. And then on the west facade, and this has been, I think, the topic of most concern, the remaining wall that's there right now is the bottom half of that kind of foremost element, where my cursor is kind of, it's not being totally responsive, but coming across here, just above the mural, underneath these windows, and going to the far extent. Without getting into a lot of detail, that wall has a lot of questions and problems associated with it. Part of it's in the right-of-way, it's kind of listing, not structurally sound. And after a lot of analysis, both by City of Aspen Historic Preservation staff and third-party consultants, there's a lot of question about the integrity of that wall. There's different kinds of brick, there's different kind of mortar. And then certainly the mural, it was mentioned by Mr. Maple earlier, the original mural in that location at that kind of far southwest corner has been there in some way, shape, or form since 1906, 1908. This most recent version of it was painted by Gard Moses in the 70s following the most recent redevelopment of the Crystal Palace. And so it's there. But again, like when this was initially conceived, there was kind of a feeling that the top of that wall was also historic as well. And as they got into it, it was clear that at least the top wasn't historic, and now that the lower half has questions about the materials and what's there. This is what was proposed in the application. Again, kind of a pretty significant change to the architectural treatment, to the entirety of the building, certainly fenestration patterns. But I think the thing that got most attention for staff in this application was a full dismantling of that western wall, salvaging the bricks that had structural integrity to them, locating them in kind of a framed element in the center of the wall, and then repainting the mural in the sort of middle of the wall. That's what was brought forward in the application. And as staff evaluated this, we had difficulty with that and had communicated that to the applicant, and we're working with the applicant on a proposal to move forward. And we're kind of assuming that with direction from HPC that we would be moving to some alternative to this. This next image is a rendering provided by the applicant in the application about what this building looks like and what the treatment of that west wall, how that fits into the sort of architectural pattern. So staff recommendation, again, I'm happy to answer any questions, but I think significant further discussion would be much more appropriate should council decide to call this up. Staff is taking no position on this. Normally we come in with full-throated support for HPC's decisions. We have a lot of respect for our board. This was a difficult decision that they made. We're particularly concerned with the procedure through which they did this. And so we're taking no position on this, contrary to the way that we normally respond to call-up noticing. While we're concerned about that procedure, there are some aspects that I do think factor into staff's consideration of this. First of all, we strongly desire to support the applicant in restarting a significant installed construction project in the heart of Aspen. That was the impetus for trying to get this onto HPC's calendar as we did. We know the community interest in getting this project moving forward. It's stalled for quite a long time, and that, to be frank, that western wall and concerns about that western wall and complexity of that western wall is to a large degree why the project is stalled. And then secondly, and this was kind of noted by staff even prior to HPC's October 2nd meeting, we were having really good conversations with the applicant about ways to move forward, and following HPC's decision, we've had further conversation. And we do think that there's a good faith willingness to work with staff and HPC's monitor to continue to refine the architecture and the preservation of existing materials, notably the mural and the remaining kind of historic sound brick that could be salvaged from it. What that eventually looks like, the configuration of that is a little unclear to us, but we do think that there's a path forward in working with the applicant outside of a, reconsideration of a resolution. So it's a complicated project. It's been a complicated path for sure. Certainly, call-up of HPC's action is a power granted to council. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Let's open it up for discussion. Anybody have questions or statements?
Yeah, I've studied the packet. I've looked at this decision. I think they're not provided more clarity on, and I think that I can get that clarity if we call this up and have a full presentation by the applicant and staff. I think there's enough community interest in it, and I would be in favor of following this up for consideration. And in that process, all we're really doing is we're asking to have a full presentation, public presentation of what HPC did. I'm interested in how the land use code was followed and how the guidelines of HPC were followed, and to make sure that all of those I's were dotted and T's were crossed. And really, since there is such a confusion, and seems like that west wall was a horse designed by committee, so now it's a camel, but it's a hodgepodge. I'd like to have real clarity on it, how it fits into past HPC approvals, and also how it may affect an HPC approval that may be needed for the armory. So I really want to have a public presentation of the applicant and staff. So I'm in favor of a couple of this.
Yeah.
I respect everything Ward said. Something public is we got a confidential memo from our attorney Kate Johnson. I won't say what was in it, but the essence that I can discuss is having to make this decision based on the land use code. And I've already made statements clear that I respect the HPC decision. I wish this was not done on Rosh Hashanah. I hope they learn from that mistake, and I hope especially Jody Surface, who was the member missing, comes to one of us or speaks up more to make sure that doesn't happen again. But as Phyllis Bronson said too, I respect the alternates and I respect that board tremendously. And once again, because I can't base my criteria off the land use code, and I've already made statements contrary to that, I can't support call-up tonight, unfortunately, because of statements I've already made and how I feel about this. Not because I don't support the project, not because I don't want to hear more, or because I've already dug myself a hole, even though it was an honest hole I dug. It's still not something I can come out of and change my mind on, so I will not be supporting call-up tonight.
Say the words out of my mouth. Additional to add, nothing to take away. I feel the exact same way. Thanks.
All right. I had a couple questions. When was the original building permit issued?
The original land use approval was 2017. I believe the permit was issued in 2019. That was for a core and shell, which translated into whatever demolition of the original building has commenced, essentially the west wall's remaining, and then the new structure that's gone up was a result of the core and shell permit. We also have a tenant finish permit that's been, that would need some refinement based on some programming changes that would likely come forward out of this approval.
And you said something about you weren't totally on board with the procedure. Were you talking about the procedure of HPC or of the applicant?
Certainly of HPC. Okay. I think it's not that I disagree. I mean, I think if they would have ended on their eventual decision on November 13th, when there was a resolution, they'd consider review criteria, and they might have disagreed with staff's position on that. All's fair, right? I am concerned that there was not a resolution that they were considering, and that review criteria that were necessary to the proposal, staff intentionally did not provide those with the hope that there would be clear direction at that October 2nd meeting to move forward, to come up with a project that HPC was going to, or a response to the west wall particularly, that HPC was going to support, and that we could, have a resolution that all parties were moving together, in consensus on. But I think, staff was a little bit taken by surprise by what transpired in the meeting, where without resolution, without review criteria, there was kind of support of the applicant as presented.
Thanks for that. Understood. I guess I'm just going to make a couple statements because I can see where this is going. But in my personal opinion, I don't know, I like to think that when you're spending millions of dollars to buy a downtown Aspen building, you do your due diligence and know what you're getting into. And I think it was well known that that was a very historic corner that was important to the community of Aspen. When I look at the rings of a new building, I can see why the owners of the building would want the mural to be moved. It makes for a much more sunny retail space on that corner, or whatever it's going to be in the new boutique hotel. And lastly, I don't appreciate that our history is being moved. When we talked about the Lift 1 corridor replacement, I remember Amy Simon, who was the head of HPC at the time, said that moving the Lift 1 wheel was akin to moving Wheeler Opera House. Move a historic element out of its historic place and lose its historic context, and it is not as historic. And I see this playing out over and over again here in our community, and it's concerning me. So with that said, I guess it's time to take.
Wait, I have some additional comments. I'm reading the tea leaves, I'm seeing, projecting the future here. So if there are questions that are unresolved in my mind that hopefully, Ben, you can answer. One of them is about the height on the south wall. There was a question, Barb Pitchford asked a question, and it was raised, is the height, it's in nonconformity now, but the approved application does not add additional height, is that true?
That's correct, and I'll be verified a building permit. Just a very quick point about the height. The building currently and will be taller than what the current land use allows. It was applied for, and prior to the 2017 outcomes of the moratorium, where we reduced heights in the core down to 28 feet. So this is a building that is subject to that previous code, and the structure, kind of the infrastructure of the building that is, the walls of the building that are already up reflect approved height, and will remain consistent with that as it goes through building permit.
So continuing along the thoughts of when I had been able to have a call up on this is fake windows on the west wall. Are they fake windows? Are the windows that are there just for faux windows? Are there what is the interior alignment on the windows that are being added on the west wall?
Yeah, that was a topic that staff asked for some additional clarity on from the applicant. Certainly in the drawings, there are some windows that are not drawn similar to the other window, don't show the piercings kind of that would replicate sort of a window. I will say that on the previous approval, and I'm going to go back a couple slides if it's okay, there were some on this facade right here. If you look at the wall, it's there, those kind of openings on the lower part of the wall they kind of show up in the ghosting on the brick. Those were also going to be windows that and openings fenestration that were not actual functioning fenestration. It is not something that's encouraged. It's not something that we like to see. We like to see architectural elements present as they're going to function. And it was a topic that we were asking for some additional clarification from the applicant on, that we will sort of get more clarification, as the project moves towards building permit and further work with staff and monitor.
And then this kind of falls in line with some of the questions that Mike Maple asked. This is designated Aspen Modern?
It is not. It was designated in a process, and if I get this wrong, Stuart, feel free to join in. The original kind of designation process happened in the sort of early 1980s under a completely different set of standards, under which we kind of eventually designated most of our Victorian era buildings. And when it was designated, there was already the kind of fully reconstructed Crystal Palace that was redeveloped in the 1970s from its Victorian roots. It was designated following that sort of redevelopment. And without getting into a very extensive conversation about a really complex building and a really complex sort of historical context, which I think this building has had all over its past, the question of designation, the question of what happens to that wall, is it demolition? Those were some of the questions that we had in response to the proposal from the applicant about how it was going to be treated with the west wall. So based on that, there were some review criteria that based on that proposal, staff felt were necessary in making a clear recommendation at the time to HPC. And so, with HPC's actions that they took, some of those things were not fully discussed, fully reviewed, fully considered, both by staff and the board.
Yeah, I think it's really unfortunate we won't be able to call this up and have a full discussion, but so I'm going to ask all the questions that I want now, and that one of them is were there concessions or incentives for whatever designation Crystal Palace building received, and what restrictions were placed upon it with that designation?
To Mr. Maple's comment and in support of your question, most of our benefits that we've had related to redevelopment of historic assets have been in the residential sector. We haven't had a ton of redevelopment happen in the commercial sector, certainly not necessarily like this. And so, other than it sort of getting in under previous code, there weren't a lot of benefits that were granted to this. There weren't a lot of variances that were granted to this. They're paying affordable housing mitigation for the net lease, and for new lodge rooms. And so those kinds of benefits that I think commonly think of around HP projects really focus on residential development.
And for clarity and for public edification, there seems to be between the applicant and staff that this wall needs to be reconstructed.
Yeah, I think to sort of meet the demands of a developed building, there needed to be an alternative treatment to that west wall than what was sort of described in its original approvals. What that treatment was going to be, how much of the wall was going to be able to remain after it was deconstructed, bricks evaluated, bricks put back in their existing locations to the degree that they could. I think staff and the applicant both are unclear about how much original brick is going to be able to be included sort of in a rebuilt wall, and how that wall is 3 courses of brick, and so between 3 courses, there's if we deconstruct and sort of use that as a facade to some degree, either rebuild where the applicant is proposed or some other configuration, it's a little clear about how much of that extent of that wall or constructed wall to provide the stability was going to be possible. I think staff's desires as much of that brick as was feasibly possible was going to be replaced, but I think and I do firmly believe this. I want to say this clearly. I do think that the sort of applicant team is committed to continue to work with us after these discussions, after kind of hearing some public comments about the mural. I'm not in any way promising any outcomes to that, but I do think there's a willingness to sort of work on an alternative solution.
Continue on the west wall. It can be reconstructed, not in the right of way. It's 4 inches in the right of way now.
Yeah, part of the thing that needed to be resolved was that there was, as the wall both is sitting and particularly as it's leaning, it was coming into the right of way. And so from staff's perspective, after sort of our analysis, reading the reports of the folks that looked at it, including previous HB, City of Aspen HPC staff, there was going to need to be an alternative treatment to that wall.
I understand the applicant's desire not to build a wall that's 8 or 10 inches out of plumb. What's left of that building that is at all historical other than that mural?
There are certainly bricks and mortar in that wall that are of Victorian era. One of the things that became made clear is that in that 1970s redevelopment of the Crystal Palace, I think there was some assumption by the community, there was some assumption by historic preservation staff, when it went through redevelopment. I think that there was an assumption that there was more historic material left following the 1970s redevelopment than there was. That's my understanding of what transpired. I do think that there's still some question about the amount of Victorian era material that's in that wall. Now, I also want to say, for the record as well, that Mr. Maple made some conversations about his perceptions of this wall, mural, and all those kinds of things. We know that to be very clear, and it's certainly something staff feels strongly about. I think there's a kind of technical preservation outcomes and what's required by code, and there's also community perceptions from folks that live here and folks that visit here. We know that mural is an iconic part of people's understanding of Aspen. It's been there for a long time, and I understand the community concern about maintaining that element of this building as it goes to redevelop.
Yeah, I know that one of the proposed solutions was to delist this building. The applicant didn't support that, but I'm thinking about HPC projects. The whole downtown core is in a historic zone, so they have purview over all of the downtown core buildings. And so I'm really concerned with the precedent that this sets. That west wall is totally different than what it was approved to be. I understand the need to reconstruct that wall, but what it was and what it's proposed to be and approved to be, I think are way beyond what is a minor adjustment. So I express my concerns for that. And again, as I mentioned earlier, we're coming up on an armory project that on Hopkins Street has some significant changes to the armory, and I'm concerned of what precedent this has on the armory, and particularly the Hopkins Street modifications that were proposed in the last drawings that we saw. And I apologize to the rest of council for taking this time. But these are things that I was hoping we could get out in the open. And for the public, HPC has final authority on this. we, on the council, we could remand it, we could send, first of all, the first two steps, first of all, have a public hearing, which just doesn't look like we're gonna get tonight. And at that full public hearing, a result of that public hearing is that city council could remand it back to HPC for reconsideration. Now, at reconsideration, they can either uphold what their decision was or they can change it. And what would happen if we remand it is another subject that evidently we're not going to get to tonight, which I think is unfortunate that we don't have a full discussion of it, of the implications of this, of HPC's ability to defend or give justification for their decision. So it's you know, I don't see what's left of this wall other than bits and pieces. I don't know why it is really listed as not Aspen Modern. I don't know why we just don't unlit it and be done with all of this and let the applicant proceed. Hopefully would proceed with retaining that cigar wall, but I think we're in a position here where there's going to be no decision, and all of those hearings and questions that I wanted the applicant and HPC to make known to the public it's not going to happen. So I just asked as many questions that I could think of in reading through my notes to get it on the record for the public. Thank you, Ben, for answering all of my questions.
You're welcome.
All right, roll call vote. Is that the next step I think we should take?
There's been no motion, so we would have to make a motion to call it up for roll call vote. Otherwise, if there's no action, it's not called up. There doesn't need to be a motion. Oftentimes, you don't make motions to call it up.
I want, for the public record, to make a motion to call up this Crystal Palace building for a full hearing.
I'll second.
Just further discussion of, once again, this is more because of the legal hole that I've already said things that would just not legally work. My decision on the land use code, so there is no going back from that. I'm already in the legal hole for this, and I don't feel like getting the city into legal trouble for something that I cannot take back. So I just want to express that's why I'll be voting no.
And I'll just respond to that, Sam, please. That it's my understanding that asking for a hearing is different than remanding it and asking for a change. That if we were to call it up just to hear the hearing, and then your previous comments may well prejudice your ability to remand it. But I think that you could vote to call this up so we have the benefit of a full hearing, and I don't think there's a legal exposure to your previous comments about Rosh Hashanah.
Yeah, well, once again, I'd only said I would go this far because the fact the meeting was on Rosh Hashanah and not because of anything else, because I trust the HPC to do their job, even if I disagree with it, which I don't know if I do on something like that, but either way, I'm ready to move on.
Okay, any further thoughts? I have a full comment. The reason I asked why the building permit when it had been issued was because I heard a lot from a lot of different people about this particular issue, and the feelings that I'm hearing are, why are we possibly rewarding somebody for bad behavior? Somebody who's been dragging their feet on this project for 5 years now, and anyway, that's the prevailing sentiment among the people I know around town, and I say this is a complex issue. I agree that the wall is obviously doesn't be structurally sound, and maybe this is the best solution moving forward. Anyway, I can see where this is going, but I will call roll call vote.
Councilor Doyle?
Yes.
Councilor Guth?
No.
Councilor Howenstein?
Yes.
Councilor Rose?
No.
All right.
So just for clarity, a split vote is no action.
Exactly.
Correct. The motion failed, so there is no call-up.
Thank you, Ben.
Yes, thank you. Just to conclude, I just want to give council confidence that continue to work with the applicant and seeing this project move forward and you know, figuring out how to best deal with the wall and the mural.
We're done.
Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, Ben.
What, like mad?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
No, thanks for asking all those questions. Though. Appreciate it.
I started to do.
Budget.
Oh, I know what's up next.
All right, we're actually on to first reading of ordinances. And the first ordinance number 16, this is City of Aspen Fall Supplemental Budget.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm the Budget Manager for the city. This is Ordinance 16, Series 2024. Staff is requesting an amendment to the city's 24 budget that increases total expenditure appropriations, including transfers, from $245.3 million to $252.2 million. This $6.9 million increase includes $1.8 million in new requests and $4.9 million of technical adjustments. There's also $3.9 million in revenue adjustments and transfers. The new requests of $1.8 million, just under $1 million in operating, and $0.8 in capital. Technical requests, including the transfer piece, a total of $5.1 previously approved by council, $91,000 in operating, and $3.2 million in capital expenditures since the spring supplemental. So those are contracts that have come forward and council has previously $165,940 in transfers between funds within the city. Accounting and other actions of technical adjustments of just over $1 million in operating, and finally, city financial policies for PTO payouts of $436,000. Section 2 of the ordinance for the city component unit funds request an increase of $48,600 for Aspen mini storage for operating expenses to get them through the end of fiscal 2024. Staff recommends approval of first reading of the ordinance and adoption of the full supplemental, and we will be back for second reading next week. I do have one final note that is not included in the memo. There will be one adjustment for second reading. We had the final numbers come in for the insurance claim for the EV chargers that were repaired by the city. So in second reading, we'll be adding $56,119 of revenue from the check, and then there'll be a expense request for equal to that $56,119 for all the repairs to the vandalism.
Questions?
Are those expenses for the mini storage, are those final expenses, or are all of those leases, stuff out of all of those units? This is the final expense of those for the mini storage?
The units are now vacant, so the property is vacant. We are wrapping up the financials right now. We've paid the majority of the accounting fees that we have done through Reese Henry. They have some of the accounting. So we'll have a few expenditures. I don't actually think I'll need that full $10,000 to close that property.
Okay.
It was a contingency to make sure we could get through the year.
Other questions or requests for second reading?
Wanted to make sure everyone was aware of the 505 fund housing lease request at the AABC. I found this one interesting in light of the 4 vacant units that we learned about yesterday in the presentation. So I guess I'd like a little explanation and discussion regarding that. Also, understanding how new of a concept is. Have we done leasing before? Obviously, the dollar amount is not enormous compared to other items, but I think it's a subject that warrants understanding and discussion.
If you'd like.
Sure. So in this particular case, we had a longtime family that approached the city indicating that they would like to lease to a City of Aspen employee. They're providing a lease to the city that's below market value for that lease. In turn, it's further subsidized to match the employee's wages for the space. So there's still a delta between that affordability for the employee versus the reduced rate being provided by the property owner to the city. The property owner was very specific about it, wanting to be a year-round person. He met some, he wanted to be part of a neighborly area and something like this. So we have an emergency worker in this space. And it is not a typical process for us, but in this case, when this longtime property owners and full-time residents at that time came to us, we said, yeah, we're willing to try this. And it's been so working for us, and we felt like it's been a reasonable subsidy given the nature of the unit's condition and our needs.
And is the $37,000 the delta between what the employee is paying in rent?
No.
Total rent?
No, that's the total rent for the year, for the unit, and then the employee, because we have the authority to expend the funds. Yep. We need to ask for the total amount, and then a portion of that is brought the lease on the unit.
And that's back into 505, correct?
Yes.
Any other questions for second reading? Board?
I move we read the ordinance, first reading.
Second.
What, 16? 16.
Okay, second.
Motion is second. Any further discussion? Roll call vote for reading of ordinance 16?
Counselor Doyle?
Yes.
Counselor Guth?
Yes.
Counselor Howstein?
Yes.
Counselor Rose?
Yes.
And Mayor Tory.
Yes.
Ordinance 16, Series of 2024, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Aspen, Colorado, appropriating an increase in 1, the 2024 municipal budget, and 2, the 2024 budgets for component unit funds of the City of Aspen and authorizing appropriations pursuant thereto.
I move approval of ordinance 16 on first reading.
I'll second.
Motion and a second for approval on first reading. Any further discussion? Could we have a roll call vote?
Counselor Doyle?
Yes.
Counselor Guth? Counselor Howstein?
Yes.
Counselor Rose?
Yes.
Mayor Tory.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see, our next first reading would be ordinance number 17, City of Aspen 2025 fee ordinance.
Thank you, Mayor. I won't reread the whole memo, but basically, a background overview. Fees are reviewed annually, both by staff and council as part of the budget development, with recommended adjustments accumulated for adoption through an annual ordinance. Proposed fee changes were presented and discussed during the 4 council work sessions, along with some specific department presentations from Golf and Recreation this past fall. In addition to typical inflationary adjustments for many fees, including Golf, Rec, and Veterans Center for the Arts, there was a continued effort to simplify and streamline fees where possible. These fee changes are built into the 2025 revenue budgets, though actual collections will depend on the volume of sales or services rendered. Staff is recommending approval of the proposed 25 fee ordinance number 17, series 2024.
Any questions at the time on the fee ordinance? I'm trying to pull something up here. Anything?
One quick comment.
Yep, go ahead, Bill.
Just want to express my appreciation for the electric approach. And, I don't have anything to really compare to, but I appreciate it being looked at and making sure we're not subsidizing people driving. So we're moving better in that direction. So thank you.
Sam?
I'll make a motion ordinance number 17, series of 2024.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Could we have a roll call vote for reading of ordinance 17, please?
Counselor Doyle?
Yes.
Counselor Guth?
Yes.
Counselor Howstein?
Yes.
Counselor Rose?
Yes.
Mayor Tory.
Yes, please.
I'll make a motion to pass, afterwards, you read it, sorry.
Ordinance number 17, series of 2024, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Aspen, Colorado, amending the municipal code of the City of Aspen to adjust certain municipal fees included under sections 2 and 26 of the municipal code.
Thank you. Questions for second reading. I think in our go around on this fee ordinance, I had a question regarding parking tickets and parking tickets that were unpaid. It was several years ago that we had quite a bit of leakage and non-payment of parking tickets, and I think we brought that more in line. Maybe it was some software-related loss as well, this, that, and the other. But I, at that time, was wondering if a program where offering the ability to pay a ticket same day or within 24 hours would give somebody the ability to pay that ticket maybe at a discounted rate. Right? The thinking there is that there are people from out of town, they're like, you know what, I'm not gonna worry about it, it's $50, but I don't live here and I'm gonna just leave and turn in this rental car and I hope to get away with it. But there are other locals that are here that get a ticket every once in a while, and they might have the ability to come in and rectify that and could do it for maybe half price or something. Again, this is an effort to avoid losing out on some of these revenues, but that would be my request. I want to know how much we are not collecting in parking fees, and maybe there was a strategy to lessen some of that loss.
Bring that back to you for second reading.
Yeah, that's all. I think that was it. We could take a motion.
We approve ordinance 17.
Second.
Ordinance 17, 2024 on first reading.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Could we please have a roll call vote for ordinance number 17 on first reading?
Counselor Doyle?
Yes.
Counselor Guth?
Yes.
Counselor Howstein?
Yes.
Counselor Rose?
Yes.
And Mayor Tory.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Next first reading is ordinance number 20. This changes to Title 25, Utility Rates.
Good evening, City Council Mayor, Cole Langford, Utilities Manager. I'm kind of standing a little bit for Justin Foreman, who's in Nebraska with our wholesale purchase power, attending quarterly meetings tonight. I'm here in front of you tonight regarding Title 20, or Ordinance 20 for Title 25 updates and rate updates. I want to note that council saw this budget work session on October 21st, and that memo is identical to one you're looking at tonight. So we will also be back for second reading on Tuesday, November 19th, next week. Looking for your report tonight for this. I'm happy to answer any questions at all.
Any questions at this time? I think when we visited this in our budget work sessions, I was asking about defraying some of the smallest residential users and spreading that amongst other users in the name of conservancy and the like. So for second reading, I'm going to still want to have that discussion and hope to understand that there's no other options but the increases that are presented to us here. But I'd be interested in other options if there were to protect some of our lower income earning residents. I could take a motion for first reading.
I'll make a motion for first reading of Ordinance 20, Series 2024, changes to Title 25.
I'll second.
A motion and a second for reading of ordinance number 20. Any further discussion? Could we have a roll call vote for reading ordinance number 20?
Councilor Doyle?
Yes.
Councilor Guth?
Yes.
Councilor Einstein?
Yes.
Councilor Rose?
Yes.
Mayor Tory?
Yes.
This is ordinance 20, series of 2024, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Aspen, Colorado, amending and adding to Title 25 of the Municipal Code of the City of Aspen, Utilities, specifically Chapters 25.04, Electricity, 25.08, Water Service General Provisions, 25.12, Utility Connections, 25.16, Water Rates and Charges, and 25.30, Water Efficiency Landscaping Standards.
I move we adopt ordinance 2024 on first reading.
Seconded.
Motion and a second for discussion. Can we please have a roll call vote for ordinance number 20 on first reading?
Councilor Doyle?
Yes.
Councilor Guth?
Yes.
Councilor Hallenstein?
Yes.
Councilor Rose?
Yes.
Mayor Tory?
Yes. That was an easy one.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Another first reading that we have this evening is ordinance number 14. This is a response to House Bill 23-1255.
Good evening, City Council. Haley Hart, Long Range Mayor, along with Ben Anderson, Community Development Director. I have a few slides I'd like to share if
Please.
that is good for y'all. Great. Okay, so today we're here for ordinance number 14, series of 2024, which is our first reading in response to Colorado House Bill 23-1255, that I'm just going to call the House Bill. So this is the House bill that was passed in the 2023 legislative session titled Regulating Local Housing Growth Restrictions. And the goal, again, was to increase housing supply and accessibility to housing development across all communities in Colorado. This is preempting home rule regulations from restricting residential growth. For the city of Aspen specifically, this is done through restricting our GMQS residential allotment system. You may recall City Council passed last summer a temporary non-renewable anti-growth law for a 2-year period. you did so last summer in order to give time to staff to figure out how to respond to the House bill. So for the last year and a half since that non-renewable anti-growth law was passed, our land use code was basically frozen in time and gave us just a moment to sort of look through the entirety of Title 26 to figure out how we were going to respond and bring the code into compliance. So in that time, staff found that the city really had three options available to respond to the House bill. This was either, number one, a complete overhaul of GMQS, which is where our residential allotment system is held. Number two was edits to GMQS that involved policy changes without doing a complete overhaul. Number three was sort of limited edits to GMQS with no policy changes, but still bringing the code into compliance. So after a thorough review of GMQS and just sort of Title 26 in general, staff's outcome was that GMQS has a lot of other critical components built into that chapter and sort of layered over time, including our affordable housing mitigation system, our fee and lieu system, change in use, multifamily replacement. And GMQS has become very complex and very interrelated. And so in response to the House bill, staff and the attorneys concluded that the best path forward at this time should be a very targeted and precise approach, again, to just bring the code into compliance. So our targeted approach to amending Title 26 resulted in finding that two of our chapters had conflicting text. And that was GMQS, and then we also found within the powers and duties of Planning and Zoning Commission allowances to grant residential allotments. So these are the only two chapters that are currently non-compliant with the House bill. So in response, we removed all mentions of residential allotments. We did red lines for these in Exhibit A and Exhibit B of the memo. In second reading, we plan to sort of go through the process of that in a little bit more depth, but just wanted to give you sort of a high glance at how we sort of took this targeted approach to just removing the mentions of the residential allotments. And the sole addition to GMQS, while we had the chapter open for the response to the House bill, was reintroducing a component that was unintentionally removed during the moratorium, which is reintroducing Category 4 restriction for commercial and lodge mitigation. So this is just a critical component of how we mitigate for development and redevelopment for these two sectors. Category 2 is for housing. Category 4 is for commercial and lodge. We are just reintroducing the exact text that accidentally got removed during the last sort of iteration of the ordinance during the moratorium. So we'd love to bring any sort of responses to questions for the House bill response to second reading. I'd like to open the sort of discussion at that time if you'd like to have us bring anything further.
Questions?
This one real quick. I can't remember what House bill it was, and maybe it was this one that concerned the demo allotment system. Was that this one?
Yes, so the demo allotment system is within the allotment system. The House bill is not directly affecting the demolition allotments. It's only affecting the ability to build new housing through like the subdivision process, so allotting new growth.
So for my clarity, was there concern at one point it would affect that, but it never did?
I don't know if there was concern. I think there was uncertainty of what the House bill, how that would interrelate with the demolition allotments. That's something that we worked through with the attorneys. That's something, I've been in discussion with other municipalities who have responded. And I think that we also came to the conclusion that it's really just targeting the allotment for residential growth. And again, just for adding new, like subdivision or adding new growth that is not currently allowed.
Understood. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Questions? Bill?
I think this is a simple, clean, easy to understand approach. I'm glad we didn't make this more complicated than it needed to be, so wanted to give you kudos there. Could you remind me, and I don't know your head, we did bring in a consultant to help with this, right?
We did not.
You ended up not.
Yep.
Wasn't there a budget request for it at one point in time?
We did. When we were honest about the response that we were going to take, if we would have done, I think it was $7,000 request, had we done option number one on that list, that we would have been spending at least that with consultant support in doing so. So that is a project that we have not expended funds on.
Good, because if you did, they would have gotten a really great deal for a little amount of work.
Yeah.
Good. I'm glad that's the approach you took, and I'm glad that you didn't end up needing the consultant. Thanks.
Questions? You know, in a lot of the meetings that I've had over the last couple of years when this was being floated around and discussed, it seemed, you know, it didn't apply necessarily as well for us in mountain communities as maybe it didn't Front Range, even Western Slope further out. But in the memo, you describe kind of situation in Aspen where there's very limited opportunity for residential development. And so while the intent of the bill was to deregulate some of the growth management, I suppose, that communities have, this may not be impactful to the Aspen landscape as we know it. Is that kind of accurate?
Yeah, I think that's accurate. And, you know, again, I spoke to some other communities who had a response, and everyone has said, we haven't seen any response yet. We haven't seen any sort of turnout, right? Like a lot of, like, for instance, Pickens County, you know, they haven't even had a request come in since they responded to it this past spring. So it's not, I don't think that it's not a highly used system within the city any longer. I mean, I had put that sort of table in the memo going, you know, really 5% of the allotments have been used over the last 7 years. Like, we just aren't seeing subdivisions and the land availability to create residential parcels at this point.
Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance number 14, series of 2024, response to House Bill 23-1255.
Have we read it yet?
Motion to read.
Motion to read, I'm sorry.
I second the revised motion.
A motion, a second to read ordinance number 14. Any further discussion? Could we have a roll call vote for reading of ordinance number 14?
Counselor Doyle?
Yes.
Counselor Guth?
Yes.
Counselor Howenstein?
Yes.
Counselor Rose?
Yes.
Mayor Tory?
Yes.
Thank you.
We're almost there.
We got another step.
Ordinance number 14, series of 2024, an ordinance of the Aspen City Council adopting amendments to Growth Management Quota System, Planning and Zoning Commission powers and duties, and other related sections for the purpose of conforming with the provisions of Colorado House Bill 23-125.
Take a motion.
I'll make a motion to pass ordinance number 14, series of 2024.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for ordinance number 14 on first reading. Any further discussion? Could we have a roll call vote for ordinance number 14 on first reading?
Counselor Doyle?
Yes.
Counselor Guth?
Yes.
Counselor Howenstein?
Yes.
Counselor Rose?
Yes.
Mayor Tory?
Yes.
Thanks, Haley and Ben.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
This brings us to public hearings. We have resolution number 126. This is the City of Aspen 2025 budget.
Resolution 126, Aspen 2025 budget. Staff is requesting resolution approval for the proposed fiscal year 2025 budget for the City of Aspen and the city's component unit funds. The 2025 budgets were presented over 4 council work sessions from September 30th to October 28th. Incorporated into the final budget proposal are all revisions discussed by council on October 28th, including an increase of the food tax refund, removal of general fund X Games funding, and removal of the Parks Memorial Bike Skills Trail capital project, as well as the other technical adjustments for the seasonal FTE reduction in engineering, Police 911 Communication Center, and revenue true-up for the awarded grant for the Coast Archery Range. 2025 budget includes projected revenues of $206,690,808 and net appropriations of $175,175,415. Total operating expenditures of $111.7 million include $5.9 million in new supplemental requests. Capital outlay is projected to be $57.1 million. And the 2025 budgeted debt service is $6.3 million. The 2025 budget has been crafted with council's 6 goals in mind, as well as continuing to provide the City of Aspen residents and visitors exceptional levels of service. Projected fund balance at the end of fiscal year 2025 is $293,575,727. 2025 budgets or component unit funds, Scott Phase 2, and Aspen Country Inn also included in the resolution and supporting documentation. Staff requests City Council approval of Resolution 126, Series 2024, to adopt the proposed budgets of City of Aspen and component units for the fiscal year 2025.
Thank you. Council, at this time, questions, comments? Some of you have some outstanding issues or questions that you want addressed or to discuss at this time?
I'll just comment that there are a lot of individual projects and budget requests within this this budget, and some of them we don't all can be voted on separately when those individual expenditures are approved by City Council. I think that our agreed upon goals of City Council for community building and health, mobility, protection of our environment, prioritization of infrastructure and maintenance of aging facilities, affordable housing, and customer-focused government are all served by the approval of this budget. I will be supporting this budget, and I acknowledge that there are items in this that not all of us at this table will approve, but I would encourage all of us to approve the budget and certainly voice their objections to those that they don't agree with, and everybody is free to make their own choice. Thank you.
Thanks, Ward. Bill?
Thanks. I still have outstanding issues. Namely, number one, I really have heartburn over the additional FTEs that keep getting requested and added each year. It seems like this table is responsible for a significant amount of growth in this community. My hesitance here perhaps makes me most anti-growth person at this table by not supporting these additional employees and members of our community that often are being brought in from elsewhere. So it is true growth. I mentioned this in general terms, and I also mentioned it in terms of the house stipend program, which we were educated on yesterday, which again, I have a fundamental issue with the concept of a stipend program, but I would look for money elsewhere, perhaps in context of less new FTEs. One of those FTEs that I particularly have an issue with is the sustainability analyst that's requested. I think this is totally an unnecessary position. I think we're doing so much already in the arena of sustainability. Some efforts I support, some do not, which I'll get into next. I don't think this is where we should be adding bodies to our community, not where we should be growing community, and not where we should be focusing our efforts to. The specific sustainability program that I cannot support, I've voiced my opinion on multiple times, is Building IQ. This program has cost us $1 million already. I still don't understand the endgame goals. I have not seen any results delivered to date. I think that this is a virtue signaling vanity project for this community, and a total waste of our taxpayers' resources. In terms of magnitude dollars, my biggest issue with this budget is Lumberyard Phase 0. I think a lot of people label me as being opposed to the Lumberyard. I'm most certainly not opposed to the Lumberyard. What I am opposed to is the city leading the development process of Lumberyard. I've made that clear time and time, and I would really love to support the Lumberyard if it's packaged nicely as a partnership with someone who is efficient and competent at developing. I think it's irresponsible to advance this phase at this time without understanding total project costs, which clearly we do not, given the 300% cost inflation on the horizontal infrastructure demolition phase. I need to know what this phase might cost us if our partner executed on the phase rather than us doing it. I don't think that performing this work in 2025 will result in a meaningfully earlier project delivery versus adding that question that I have about what it might cost if our partner executed it. Lastly, and certainly the most small component of my comment, the ARC locker replacement. I was there over the weekend. I'm so deeply appreciative of the ARC and all the services and facilities and recreation that it provides. I don't see those lockers as need total replacement. I'd much rather see those be repaired, repainted. This just seemed frivolous sounding to me. So that would be my one minor request to change. Those are all my comments. Thanks.
Thanks. I think I'd love to ask for an update on, you brought up the ARC locker replacement in our work session, and so the response at the table, that was something I think that we could look at or evaluate it and get a little finer grained on it. Part of Bill's contention may be around the price tag, including some new locking mechanisms or what have you. Anyway, you remember when he shared his concerns at the last meeting? Can you just a response about where the status of that project is at this time?
Yeah, so these are the original lockers from the construction in 2003, or sorry, 2003. So they're 22-year-old lockers. So about 5 years into the ARC being open, we already started to have some corrosion and some of those starting to fall apart. So we've done different things to kind of help replace that in. About 8 years ago, we replaced the bottoms of them with flat bottoms to help with the corrosion and the infrastructure and to address some of the water mitigation. And then in 2018, when we had our pool locker room remodel, we did repaint them. So the underlying issue and problem is the rust and corrosion of the steel that's currently there. And then the old hinges, and as we paint them, they're starting to become harder and harder to open and close. And so best practice for aquatic facilities is replacement of middle lockers put in with heavy-duty plastic lockers that can weather the pool environment, so those harsh corrosive environments. So it's more so that this is a problem that we've kind of had, and we've been trying to fix it, we've gone along, and it's kind of getting to a point where the infrastructure of those lockers is, they're rusting and they're becoming not hazardous, but they're definitely getting to end of life. So we're looking at how we can replace them with a better product, a more heavier plastic that we can live out, hopefully, the building. So that's kind of where we're at.
Thanks for the explanation.
Yeah.
Certainly most concern of my list, but I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Other comments or questions at this time?
Yeah, I just want to say thanks to the finance department. This budget season was the easiest one I've ever been through. It was very comprehensive and yet easy to understand. I'd also like to show my support for, and I agree with Bill's sentiments about hiring new FTEs, but the truth is our community is growing and our community expects a certain level of service. And as our community grows, we need to hire new employees to meet those demands from our community. And I'm actually especially excited about a new sustainability employee because of the Building IQ program. We have already benchmarked over 36% of Aspen's built square footage environment, which is really important to know where our energy is being used so we can try to save energy and to use our energy better and transition from fossil fuels to electricity. I support this budget. Thank you.
Thank you. This is a public hearing on resolution number 126, City of Aspen 2025 budget. Are there any members of the public that wish to make public comment this evening on the budget? Yes, sir.
Hello, Matori, council members. I'm here before you as an employee of the City of Aspen.
I need to stop you. You cannot testify as an employee of Aspen. You can't testify as a voting member of our community, so.
I'm sorry.
And please state your name for the record.
For the record, my name is Javier Valencia. I am here before you as a citizen of the City of Aspen. I would like to discuss about the stipend proposition because I feel that it is, sorry.
Take time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I feel that this stipend proposition is incredibly important to the employees of this city. I would not receive any benefit from this, but I would like to speak out about it because I believe that the concerns that were raised before by council, although relevant and important, are not outweighing of the benefits that this stipend provides to the employees of this city. Some of the concerns that were brought about were that the influx of money might be bad for the general community, that the influx might cause renter or realtor. Let me read a little bit.
Yeah, take your time.
That this would incentivize landlords to raise rents, or that we would be outcompeting private employers. The position, or at least my opinion around this situation, is that we have protections in Colorado to be able to defend against unfair rental raises, as well as a rent is locked in for the year. There's no ability for Coloradans to continue to raise that rent price with your contracts. So, I think in this competitive market is not able to compete well against private hiring positions. We aren't able to offer the best wages because we are city employees. The city is not able to really compete with that market. The city also is unable to compete with flexibility that many other private firms may have. It is very difficult for the city to tell its employees that they can work from home or work away from this department, because we do in-person interaction with our citizens. We think it is very important that our employees are consistently in the city limits to be able to facilitate our services towards people and have that face-to-face interaction. This importance and lack of flexibility then makes us a little bit less attractive towards hiring. When we are unable to hire and maintain that talent that is so important to us, we see these rates of turnover that have gone up since previous years. This stipend allows for a way to not only retain those employees, but also give some people a little bit of breathing room. One of the largest reasons that, or stressors that I've come across and that we've seen throughout studies is that rent is the biggest concern for people on a monthly basis. If we are able to provide some form of alleviation of that, that can help people to stay in the valley and really make our community as happy with the service that we can provide, because we can maintain the talent that is required to provide that level of service. I know Ward also brought up the taxation side of this request, but at least in my opinion, as a citizen of the city that also uses a lot of its services, if you were to tell me that the employees that need to come here to work and help me utilize our necessary services, such as water or electricity or all of those things, that we were going to take, I used the 2024 budget number, so that we were going to take about a 0.003% of our budget towards helping those people to get here more easily, to not have to worry about their daily homes, to be able to provide the service that we request from them, that this would be a good incentive to promote this program. And I think I'd just bring it back to the overall goal of the program, which is to be more equitable. And even if equally we are not all, or all of employees of the city do not receive this stipend, that the equity side, in which people who live below an AMI and may be more concerned or more worried than those that receive high pay, would have a better outlook when they come to work for the city. I think it's a good way to show that the city cares for the people that take care of this community, as we are all are.
Thank you, Citizen Javier, for your heartfelt comments.
I am so sorry. I get so nervous about this kind of stuff.
Thank you so much for your comments. Yes, and thank you very much. It's not easy for just anybody to get up there and address council, and it can be even more difficult for city staffers and employees. But it is a safe space, and you are welcome to share your views, and we appreciate it. So thank you very much.
For your time.
Thank you.
Other member of the public to comment this evening on resolution number 126, which is the City of Aspen 2025 budget? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to Council Tafe for more comments. Before a motion, I would like to just share a few comments from myself. Bill, I want to address some of your concerns. The sustainability analyst, you're right, we do a lot of work in the city around environmental stuff. I think we have more work to do around environmental stuff. My intention is to revisit some more items for Environmental Action Year. But I think that Environmental Health Department is part of the team here that we have that makes a positive impact on our community. And I think that it's through more environmental action and more environmental department activities that there could be great positive impacts for your children as well. And so I think it is something that goes to the sustainability and longevity of a wonderful community that we have. When it comes to building IQ, and I understand your your concerns around building IQ. But where this is we've just gotten through the benchmarking process. And I know that you potentially have had some fears about the city mandating some changes and putting onus on some building owners that really probably inappropriate and untenable and for a lot. And in my conversations in preparation for this meeting, I wanted to double check in on that Building IQ program. And it's going to come back to City Council for next steps and next measures. Our goal with it is to help building owners, right? You know, we're trying to create a program that is not just with penalties for inaction, but really the assistance and the partnership to help building owners improve their environmental profile, footprint, if you will, lessen those costs maybe to their tenants, to themselves. And so I think you're going to have a big part in that, and how that program really develops and how that program can be an assistance and not a hindrance to building owners. And I think it can be a good program. I shared your same concerns about it in the beginning, and so I've gone back and kind of double checked in to say, hey, you know, we are not looking at a heavy-handed environmental program. That's not what we want, but we want something that is collaborative, a partnership, and something that helps our business owners and our building owners.
Can I respond to that one?
Yeah, sure.
I appreciate all your comments, and I understand I am concerned about a heavy-handed, punitive approach. Fundamentally, what it comes down to is that this isn't really rocket science. Every building is susceptible to a higher energy usage because of less efficient windows, less efficient insulation, less efficient roofing, mechanical systems. Depending on the era of when the building was built or last upgraded, those things are, you can really throw a dart at the dartboard and nail exactly what kind of biggest opportunities are. It's not that difficult to figure out. So to spend millions of dollars on these benchmarking efforts, create all this data, it just seems to be unnecessary to me. And it's not that hard to create programs that incentivize window upgrades, roofing upgrades, insulation upgrades, mechanical system upgrades. Just not that difficult. Those are the 4 things. There's not really that much more to it. Have large impacts. Those are the 4 most impactful areas. Yes, there's small things here and there, you know, adjustable, programmable thermostats. CoA knows those things. But the biggest are the 4 that I just mentioned. And there's big headwind in upgrading those things, cost being the biggest one of them. So why don't we just create incentive programs and see how they work? I don't think you need all this data and spend. I'd rather see the dollars used to actually effectuate change on buildings rather than create programs and plans and data sets to try to effectuate change.
Well, luckily we've gotten through that data set building, and we are going to move into the process where you're going to have a hand in being able to create the program that moves it to the step that you want. I think that you know, the views that you just shared are your views, are not the responses and the partnership that we've heard from other building owners. And there are people that are excited about this because they do need that. They do want the help. And they don't see it as simple as maybe you do. And maybe that's to your credit. I don't know. But anyway, I just wanted to say that I hear your concerns around it. I don't think you need to fight it. I think it's going to involve you to a heavy degree, and you're going to have an opportunity to shape a program that's going to be for building owner and business owner benefit. I want to then talk about Lumberyard Phase 0 for view on the budget. And, you know, once again, we have minimized this to Phase 0.1. It's a $3 million ask for getting and continuing this property to get in position. You continually say that you are pro-housing and even pro-lumberyard, and that you just see a better way forward here. I think that this doesn't slow this project down like you've suggested we should do. I think we should move forward. I think that there are going to be the partnership opportunities coming available you are looking forward to. So I understand your hesitancy there, but I do think that our team has done a great job to bring our costs back in line for Phase 0.1. Let's get this property in a position to be utilized. And move it forward so that these partners that we're going to be finding are ready to be at the table and have a piece of property that they can start going vertical with as soon as they can. I think that's going to be a good thing. My personal comments that I wanted to share in here were about the Armory. And I wanted to just say that to my fellow council members, I think that the Armory is going in somewhat of the wrong direction. The last iterations, while they are bringing it more in line with what our discussions have been, I still have reservations around the top floor being 2 restaurant and bars situation. I think that that be better utilized for community asset as a hall with a restaurant and food and beverage capabilities, but could be used for other items like a 2-week holiday market, guest chef appearances and the like, gatherings for our community and for community's kids. And then when you look at the building plans that we were approving at our last work session, blowing out the back of the building, while it was kind of a neat and modern thing for it, I do think that it went away from some of the historical integrity of the building. So I'm not going to withhold my vote this evening from this budget approval, but I just wanted to give my fellow council members a caution about the direction that the Armory is going. As I said before, I hope that maybe the financing for it requires a public vote to support or not support the plans that are put forward. There is still time for this phase that we can move that towards a better programmatic interior, but I just wanted to bring that up this time. I will not withhold my support for the budget, but I do have questions around what is becoming another $40 million project in the heart of Aspen. I wanted to comment on the bike skills park that came before us recently. I withheld support for the bike skills park because of what was presented to me. Originally, the conversation around it was that it would be a great place to take your kids to introduce them to mountain biking skills. But then the program that we were shown was something with 4 different tracks, 4 different levels, a hub at the beginning and a hub at the end. So I think that the uses there were maybe a little bit more intense than that property and project should bring to light if it was to be there. I could see a reworked bike skills park that is a smaller impact there, but what was presented, I just did not support for it. I have a, in summary, I agree with what Ward was saying. Look, the budgets are very difficult. Nobody gets everything they want in them. What we try to do is move as many things forward as best we can. While we all have concerns about growth, we all have concerns about budget size and allocation. I think our team has done an exceptional job. I took the time to sit down with Pete Strecker to have just a plain conversation. I think it may have been 15 minutes, right? Just to check in and ask the things that I don't know and what I don't know to look for. And there's a whole bunch here, What you see is what you get. And while some of it may be staggering to some, this is the city of Aspen. We operate a high-level organization and a high-level community, and I want to intend to continue to do that. As I said, I will be supporting the budget this evening, even though I have some reservations around different items myself. I think in whole, this was very well presented and prepared. And I look at the team that's at the table in front of me. I know you guys have others that you work with through all departments, and I also want to say thank you to Sarah because this is truly one of the most important things that we do in our year. So. With that, those are my comments. I think Ward may have had some follow-up.
Yeah, Sam as well, but I just want to, but you're in a unique situation, and your skill set and the environment you work in makes it very abundantly clear to you that there are 4 areas where you don't need to have these studies. I think your skill set isn't shared by, and knowledge is not shared by, I think, the vast majority of the commercial sector. I would, in all seriousness, like you to consider the energies are to come up with programs that could address those 4 areas and perhaps present those to staff and to council, where we could spend money to mitigate and hopefully spend money from fees or from that aren't costs to the business owner to find grants. But anyway, I appreciate your comments. I understand them. I do support that program, but it would be like somebody asking me, what happens when your DHCP server doesn't work? You don't get an IP address and, you don't get DNS. I understand it. You understand stuff that we don't understand. So I appreciate your comments. And I share some of the concern about the Armory as well as a number of other items that we will be subsequently discussing. But on the whole, I think we're going in the right direction. We're spending a lot of money. I think we're pursuing the goals we defined as a city council, I don't know, a year and some month ago. Thank you for all the work. And as John said, every year, this may be my 8th round with budgets. Every year's gotten easier. Part of that's because of my familiarity, and part of it is because of the quality of the presentation. And I think Pete's clip art was slipped a little bit this year, but thank you.
Ward, all your energies are if you kill building IQ.
Just want to comment on the budget. Yeah, thank you for your work. This is always very difficult. I think you do a great job, and not every community and not every budget already meets their budget and has such a good ending fund balance, so I really want to commend you on that especially. When it comes to the FTEs, like everyone else, I have my concerns. I mean, this is growth. We are a demanding soul. I feel like this community is very contradictory a lot of the time as far as we want things, but we don't want the other things that come with it. It's very difficult to build up here. You know, something like the city manager's office, like those are necessary positions, and they might feed into succession thing. Something like the Wheeler, I mean, this is for like a quality and wonderful spot, and it's obviously coming out of the Wheeler Fund, which has plenty of money for the other things. I share Bill's concern with the sustainability analyst. You know, it always like comes off as a perception of being evil, but it's really not that. It's just a different way of handling the environment. So many times I just think it should be put towards energy efficiency or climate solutions versus another person to work on something like that, having been a sustainability minded myself. And I never really did get the specifics on that position. And then lastly, when it comes to the housing stipend, I want to firstly thank Javier for coming and speaking. I know how difficult that was. I have reservations, once again, not out of a sense of evilness, because I think there are unintended consequences when you do something like this. I also think in a community like this, it's you're competing against not just the private sector, but the public sector. And obviously, all the money we get here comes from everyone, including the private sector, and to subsidize the employees of the city of Aspen. So perception-wise, it's not always the best either. I hope for the best with it. I'm not asking to split. I don't think there's a majority of polling anything up here, so I'll just go with budget unless I hear otherwise. But those are my concerns, and I think we'll move forward into 25 better off just about everything. And you know, hope is not good edgies, but I think we have good plans devised for 99.9% what we're doing. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you. No further comments. We can take a motion.
I move, green lights on. I move we adopt Resolution 127, Series 2024,
26.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm moving ahead. 126. Series 2024, the 2025 budget.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second for resolution number 126. Further discussion? Could we have a roll call, please, on resolution number 126?
Counselor Doyle?
Yes.
Counselor Guth?
No.
Counselor Howenstein?
Yes.
Counselor Rose?
Yes.
Mayor Tory?
Yes. Thank you. Our next item is also a public hearing. This is resolution number 127, APSHA 2025 budget.
Resolution 127, Series 20 staff is requesting resolution approval recognizing the proposed 2025 budget for APSHA, Smuggler Affordable Housing, and the APSHA Development Fund. Proposed budgets were presented at the October 21st council work session. Approval of the APSHA by resolution has occurred annually as a recognition from City Council for its support of the budget and subsidy provided by the City of Aspen. The 2025 budget includes revenues of just shy of $4 million and expenditures of $3 million. This is inclusive of supplemental requests for a new APSHA housing policy analyst position and year 2 of the Essential Home Repairs Pilot Program. 2025 budget will require the city and county to each subsidize APSHA budget by $1.4 million to adequately maintain the targeted annual reserve of the funds. 2025 ending fund balance is projected to be $478,951. Smuggler Housing Fund has projected revenues of $90,500 and total expenditures of $170,450. And finally, the APSHA Development Fund has budgeted revenue of $16,200 and total expenditures of $24,220. Staff requests City Council approval of Resolution 127, Series 2024, for the proposed 2025 budget for APSHA, Smuggler Affordable Housing Fund, and the APSHA Development Fund.
Are there any questions at this? This is a public hearing. If there's members of the public that wish to comment on resolution number 127, the APSHA budget for 2025. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to council table. Bill.
I just, I neglect to comment how appreciative I am of the two of you for the work that you did on all budget presentations, so thank you. On this one, I just want to reiterate prior potential home repairs pilot. I really hope that we're getting good feedback here and learning how to effectuate broad change. A few $100,000 here and there is not going to solve our big issues, which are, you know, a severe underfunding of deferred maintenance and sort of a structural flaw in the way that APSHA ownership is set up with a disincentive to maintain and improve your properties. So I'm not opposed to this, but I hope that we're really using it as an opportunity to learn and gain knowledge and make enhancements to our program. And I view this as an investment in that, not as a solution, a permanent solution. Thanks.
Any other council comments or questions?
I just support the work of APSHA. I think that there's a lot of lot of improvements that can be made, but we'll just keep going forward.
I would agree with that. I'm really proud of the strides Ash has taken in the last 2 years that I've been on the board with the home repair program and the capital reserve studies. I think we are making progress. Thank you.
Motion for resolution number 127, series 2024, Act 2025 budget.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? Could we have a roll call vote, please, for resolution number 127?
Counselor Doyle.
Yes.
Counselor Guth.
Yes.
Counselor Howenstein.
Yes.
Counselor Rose.
Yes.
Mayor Brady.
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
And one more item for us tonight. We have this number 19. This is also a public hearing. This is the utilities updates, water service line requirements.
It's getting empty out there.
Good evening, City Council. My name is Erin Laughlin. Erin Laughlin Maloney. I'm the Field Operations Manager for Utilities, and here tonight to give an overview of the new action within under the proposed Ordinance 19, which was last presented to you on October 22nd's regular meeting by the Director Justin Foreman. Nothing in your packet has changed since that first reading. So just a reminder of why we're here tonight. The Water Department believes that an update to Title 25 is necessary to help ensure our department's ability to continue maintaining the compliance with state and federal requirements under lead and copper rule revisions, which have been recently strengthened to protect citizens against lead in drinking water. The department's been monitoring for lead and copper within the distribution system since 1992 in accordance with drinking water regulations, and to date has no levels. The department completed the required service line inventory as well as a service line replacement plan based on best available information to date and sent that to the state for the over 4,100 services in the system. This ordinance includes language that will help facilitate field verification of unknown material type services, as well as help facilitate service line replacement requirements and timeframes to enable us to continue compliance with the regulations set forth under the perpetual state and federal guidelines. In response to the previous questions at the first reading, Council had questions on specifically galvanized requiring replacement lines and whether the department would ever consider not requiring replacement of that material type within our system. So we reviewed the state rules for classification of galvanized service lines. The level of proof required to classify a galvanized line as non-lead, which would be a non-replacement type, is pretty high. We would need to prove that there was never any presence of lead within the city's distribution system, as well as any customer premise plumbing, including lead-based water. So based on that, the department feels it's most prudent to contain the classification for replacement of any galvanized lines within the system to continue meeting the intent of the public health regulations. We intend to work with any homeowners on the timeline for replacement if their service falls under that category. Although it should be mentioned, galvanized service lines are currently not standard, very likely at or nearing the end of this full life, and often a common issue for customers regarding service line integrity and repair. We intend to come to council anytime there's an update as these rules evolve, and I'd like to open the floor for discussion or questions you may have on the proposed ordinance.
Is there discussion or questions that you may have on the ordinance? Bill?
Firstly, thank you, Aaron, for that research and explanation piece. I've been thinking about this a lot, and I think my biggest concern comes down to the trigger of those lines that do need to be placed. I think the way that it's worded right now is any, I'm having trouble finding it right now, but any construction, any permitting, please feel free to jump in if you remember the terminology.
I'm just fine. I have the ordinance in front. I'm going to find the section you're looking at. So
yeah, here it is. So, customers must bring the service line up to current water distribution standards if service line is found to be non-standard through the course of construction, development, or other maintenance. And here's why I'm concerned with this. I'm not trying to pick on any one potential water customer might find themselves in this situation, but suppose there's a elderly or a lower income water customer who has absolutely no idea what their water line is made of, and they, for some reason, need to change their bathtub to a walk-in shower because of physical changes in their life and their body. You know, what was maybe a feasible, doable, necessary project that might cost them $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 suddenly becomes a $50,000 project because they have to dig up and change their entire service line out to the curb.
In there.
So, and you know, depending on circumstances, it could certainly be a lot more than $50,000. I mean, you got a large tree that happens to be under the existing or above the existing line. Now you got to pay tree mitigation fees to remove the tree so that you can dig up the existing line. I mean, the list of circumstances that could make the cost of a project like this go up is quite long. So I think here's what I would like everyone to consider is, could we define the triggers? a little bit better so that it is a significant project that someone's undertaking, not a very minor project that someone might be undertaking? Or other maintenance, what does that mean? How can we make sure that the trigger is sort of, the trigger justifies the potential cost of a project like this? I don't know what your responses are to that, Aaron and Todd. That's really my concern, is overburdening somebody with something they're not expecting, surprising them. No fault of their own. It's not a common, someone talked about due diligence of commercial buildings tonight. Understanding what your water service is made of is not a common due diligence item in a residential purchase. So this is something that will catch the unlucky few by surprise. And I just hate for a simple maintenance item or small construction or permitting item to lead to such a nasty surprise.
I think the department's certainly sensitive to that, and we understand, because it's a small portion of the current customer base who very likely would not be interested in this as a planned project. So there's communications between our department and CHA regarding the Essential Home Repair Program and how some of those eligible homeowners may qualify to use program fund that if it is appropriated to continue in 2025, if they're on this list and they receive notification from us. I think the ordinance with the timeframes for replacement is intended to provide flexibility in the planning process to see there's a planning horizon efficiency that maybe we can work on with them if there's a different capital project in the area in out years, that proving that there's diligent attempt at working it in as it could best be achieved. I believe the trigger that was in the code in consultation with community development groups and utilities to best meet the intent of the state and federal rules, which do require constant notification of a material type, even upon sale or transfer of ownership, notification of a material type, otherwise will go with the property. So the trigger is intended based on the current records, and so it's based on our current inventory. So there's the 4 indicated now that are on the list, categorized as galvanized, requiring replacement. Theoretically, those 4 would be the ones, if they triggered a permit of those types, will be required to replace their line in accordance with current standards. Further verification next year that's planned in a capital project to verify the unknowns on the initial inventory may change. Maybe some of those may end up needing to be recategorized, and it'll be a continuing conversation. But we're certainly sensitive to it, especially in a system where the entire service line is owned by customers and not the city. And would just like to note there's state funding available through the state revolving fund, which the utilities department annually presents an application to remain on the eligibility list for distribution of those funds. And the funds can be used for service line replacement. We're keeping tabs on distribution of them. We haven't awarded any yet. We're one of many municipalities that apply for those funds. But we're certainly trying to be creative within the confines we have of ownership and replacement of services to make sure we meet the intent of the rules for service line replacement within the time frame set by the federal government, while being sensitive to customers who will not necessarily have a planned project on the horizon.
Yeah, I appreciate the activity and all the things that you said. I just feel much more comfortable if this is codified with defined trigger point where you come in, we'll use the example of that walk-in bathtub situation, right? It's like one of those things you're doing out of necessity, you're not trying to spend a lot of money. And if that was, what is probably a stressful time in someone's life, if that triggered a huge project because someone decided it was and didn't have that level of sensitivity at that moment, or there's pressure to get these things resolved, that's all swan, all sorts of situations that could happen years into the future, I would be much more comfortable if we said it was a project of this magnitude, either dollars-wise or square footage-wise or something that we could agree on, that just felt reasonable.
Would that example trigger this, changing out a bathtub to a shower?
For customers, based on the current records the department has, if they're on the list requiring a categorized line for replacement, which is 4 customers, akin for that type of permit, then yes. It should note that they're already going to be notified that they will need to work with the department to identify a timeline for replacement, regardless if they come in for this permit, or that kind of permit type that's codified in this proposed ordinance.
But that's sort of the point where the screws can get put to you. And one thing I want to jump in on, there's 76 unknowns still. So that the 4 could become 80 in theory.
Well, it was 77 until about a year and a half ago, because.
Yeah, so I think to say it in other words, Bill's hypothetical, 4 customers could be impacted under that hypothetical. The 70, we believe that there's probably some ways that we could work with customers for physical verification, as Aaron mentioned at the start, to avoid the hypothetical you described. Or in development, a lot of times this is going to happen, and somebody's going to elect to do this. Really, this is also about protecting customers' health and safety. And I would just also add that the utility is very much incentivized to maintain a positive relationship with these customers, since we interact with them on a monthly basis by sending them a bill, among other things. So yeah, don't want to downplay those comments. Want to let you know that that sensitivity is high.
If I could, Mayor, I helped work on this ordinance, and I have thoughts about Councilmember Riku's comments. We talked a lot about this because I had some of the questions, I think you did. I will note that what I want to sort of point out is if somebody comes in to do a bathtub replacement and it's discovered, the way this is written is we would make it a condition of their approval, but I want to note that just upon the discovery of it, they're already on a time frame to replace it. So it's not like it would be put off indefinitely. If we discover it, we have to give you notice, and then you have, I think it's 2 right-of-way seasons to replace it. Is that?
Yeah, that's the goal is 2 right-of-way seasons upon adoption of ordinance or upon time of discovery, whichever is later, with the inclusion of an extension option to work with the department to show good faith efforts to plan on a horizon that makes sense.
It's consistent with federal and state law. So once it's discovered you're on this time frame, I think would work with you not to impose stricter timeframes. If it was discovered as part of the permitting process, we'd still want to give you as much time as possible. I will say, I think if it becomes a significant financial burden for any customers, like you said, worst case scenario 80, we could come back to you and we feel that there's, that these customers don't have the financial need. What cities are doing across the state are developing like a funding source for people to seek assistance. We did not feel it's necessary in light of the low numbers we have here. So few customers that this is probably going to impact that we didn't propose that as part of this ordinance scheme. But I think if that became a bigger issue, where we're seeing it more and more often, that might be something we can consider in the future to address your concerns. But I just want to be clear that by triggering a permitting process, you're still on the timelines, regardless of whether we make it a permit condition or not. So that might sort of address some of your thoughts there.
It does, but it doesn't make me feel better. It makes me feel worse. It's just not a reasonable amount of time in the magnitude of the expense that someone could incur here. And I don't think 80,000 is the worst case. I know firsthand how expensive work like this can be in the city of Aspen. And, imagine someone unlucky happens to be in the core, and now you're talking about tearing up a sidewalk that has snow melt in it and stormwater infrastructure that you have to replace and sidewalks that you have to look. I mean, this could be many hundreds of thousands of dollars if you get exceptionally unlucky. I get that there's state and federal rules here, but I just don't feel good about this. And whoever's sitting up here is really good to hear about it when someone.
I say this process is always prosecutorial discretion. It gives the utility a lot of discretion on how they want to handle these. I don't know that we would take the hard line of like demanding compliance and prosecuting them, it's an availability because of all the things you've mentioned. So I just want to highlight
Again, I appreciate it, but my request would be come up with some more defined thresholds in here. If there's some way to put in specific provisions about timeline extension or anything like that, that wouldn't get us in trouble here, federal law, I'd request that. It's just, it feels like someone could get really beat up here.
I just point out there is a provision for a timeline extension in the ordinance as drafted. And it's not an extension with a time frame, kind of an open-ended extension to be worked out between the department and a potential customer. The intent of the 2 right-of-way season conversation was in part related to hope efficiencies that could be identified for certain customers in a small portion of the customer base. Knowing how different departmental capital projects are planned out and more clearly defined on a 1 or 2 year outlook on like 5 or 10 year long-range plan, understanding what curb, sidewalk, and gutter projects might be happening, or what asphalt work might be occurring, that maybe there could be some efficiencies in identifying spots within town where a private customer could take advantage of immobilized contractor doing city work.
I again, appreciate that so much. I just, this worries me.
Without the appeal thing that without the fund that you were describing that could be set up if in the future, is there an appeal? Like, is this something that somebody could appeal to city council or somebody and say, hey, this is worst case scenario as we've talked about it, and this is where I'm at, and is that a recourse for somebody? Can somebody?
Yeah. So, one, I think it kind of gets to you, but if we were to penalize somebody for violating this code, I absolutely think the law provides, whether it's to you or to a court of law, an appellate path. I don't know that we built an appeal section particularly in this ordinance. So a lot of ordinances you have an appeal section built in where if, for instance, somebody feels that they are that the city has acted in a way as erroneously applied the law, they can appeal to city council. If that's something you would all like to see, we can certainly amend the ordinance to include that, where they would come to you before we take any sort of action to enforce these provisions, whether it be going on their property. One of the options I think we have here is to seek a court order to go into the property to fix it if they don't fix it, and then leave property. And that's how we've built into most. That's not unique to this. That's in other sections of our code. And I think that would be probably would go if somebody were to say we can't fix it because of financial hardship. I I think at that point, we would evaluate our ability to fix it for them and lien the property and work out some agreement outside of the code to have renaming process take place, which you have the power to do.
One thing I should have said is that if there was any evidence of lead in the water system at all, I'd have a different sort of tone here, because I think that is for the sake of the greater community. But given that you've identified that there does not seem to be any risk here, and doesn't seem to be any imminent risk here forthcoming, I'm just concerned about the unlucky.
Okay. Council members, you've heard some comments on the request and looking for other support. Are there other council members that seek more work on Ordinance 19 and bring it back to us, or not? And do we feel comfortable moving? Sam?
I appreciate Bill's argument. It makes a lot of logical sense to me, and it feels like it wouldn't take that much effort to put in some fail-safes, such as just an appeal process. So adding an appeal process to me seems perfectly reasonable to prevent the worst from happening, even if that worst is pretty infrequent. So I think we'd all feel better about that.
Thanks. Board, and then what would you like to do?
Well, I would encourage continuing to look for ways to fund the line replacements. I'd like to quantify exactly how many there are. And is there a possibility that if any lead is detected in the water, that triggers an automatic replacement? If there is no lead, that a replacement isn't required?
I don't want to speak, I guess, are you lead present within the home and the system, the distribution system?
Well, the service line comes from the city utility to the house. So if you measure water in the house and there's lead, then that would trigger a replacement of the service line. I doubt that there's lead water that comes to our faucet, in the absence of a galvanized line or lead line or any other type of delivery material. Is that correct? There's no lead in our drinking water?
There's no indication of it based on the decades of monitoring that's been performed and has continued to be performed.
So the only lead that would be detectable in home would be lead that was through the pathway from the street to the faucet?
Or internal plumbing to the house, or the associated solder holding that plumbing together.
So I'm just trying to find a way to have a trigger that you don't have to do if there's no indication of.
I don't think that is consistent with state and local law, or state and federal law. So the state law, I think this was in reaction to what we've seen in other places in the country, is you replace service lines. One, we inventory them. It is our obligation to inventory them. And for the ones that are found to either be made of galvanized material or lead, that the state requires them to, and requires us to have a program in place to replace those lines in a timely manner. So that's what this is accomplishing. I don't think you can opt out of you don't have to replace it if it's lead or if it's galvanized material. There are other materials that wouldn't trigger this at all. It's just those two types. Is that correct? I'm looking at these experts and engineers that understand these terms a lot better than I do.
That is correct.
Yeah, if they're lead pipes within the house is quite old. I think public safety should be number one for government. So I know that there's some items that Bill's expressed concern with. I share those concerns, but I think that I'm going to support this because of the public safety.
Can I ask one more follow-up?
Yeah.
Wouldn't a backflow preventer prevent any lead-contaminated water introduced from the inside of a building, at the very least, maybe not the service line, but the inside of a building, from flowing somehow into the water system, the broader water system?
As long as there wasn't any in the service line downstream of the backflow preventer. I think this is really about individual consumer protection more than system-wide protection based on the state and federal regulations.
So one other thought that could be part of this appeal process could be a financial appeal to city council, whether we pre-earmark funds or say that funds from City of Aspen may be available for assistance through an appeal process, something like that. But again, I'm just really worried for all of our sakes that one of our neighbors, friends, relatives, colleagues, whatever, just becomes a few. I mean, I am cautioning you now, this bill could be very significant.
Like I said, I just lived through this, so I understand it. Sarah?
I'd recommend to the council just maybe getting some familiarity with the tools that we already have at our disposal. Or compliance within 2 right-of-way seasons. The reality is that we can extend that up to 5, 8 right-of-way seasons if necessary to work with a property owner. The other thing is that liens are always a bad thing. There's times, and it's a common tool used by local governments when there's an affordability challenge. So I'll give you an example. Previous employer I had, we would, in that municipality, we would lien for sidewalk repairs so that they wouldn't become doable until sale of property. So there's mechanisms like that. Because it's such a small exposure area, I'm not concerned that this is detrimental to the fund while complying with our regulatory requirements here, because I think we would spend more heartache if we were getting cited for not meeting these federal and state regulatory requirements than we energy on that, and rather spend energy just working with that property owner. Where I think get a beneficial outcome property owner and for our regulatory needs in a proactive way with them. If you'd like to add an appeal process in, typically I am on the internal appeal, so to speak, when there is a lack of agreement, and so those are often presented to me on different matters. I'm happy to fulfill that role here as well. Certainly, though, if the council would like to hear the appeals and you'd like us to amend the code, we would just need direction tonight, and we'd ask you to continue to a date certain. I would let Kate about how quickly she could write that, whether that would be for the 19th or for the first meeting on December 3rd. So we can prepare that language for your review.
And just for some clarity, I think when you appeal process, so we have several types of appeal processes. Many go to the administrative hearing officer, so that's one option for you to send an appeal to. But I think, and maybe appeal isn't going to give you what you want here. If you want people to have the option to come to you when they face these financial hardships, is what I think I'm hearing. I think they have that ability to come to you and work with staff to get something before you in form of an agreement that you don't necessarily need to codify. But if you want, if they feel aggrieved or a decision's been wrongly made or an identification's been wrongly made, an appeal is really designed to have a second set of eyes to look at something again to say, did the city staff follow the code? So in this case, I think the city staff will follow code. We would only really demand repair if we had evidence that a lead line existed. And so really when you say appeal, what you're looking at is, did city staff make the right decision? In this case, I think you'd want to present maybe another option for those that may not be able to handle the repairs on a timely basis. And I think we can take that direction. I just don't know that you need to codify it. I don't know that would create more issues than just handling them on a case-by-case basis, because we do have it happen in other areas. And I'll defer to staff because I think they deal with them far more often than I do. But I know we've managed repairs in other type scenarios, and we've worked through those at our level. With always sort of the end game, if it gets there, is coming to you and saying, do you want to offer any financial assistance? That would be probably done through a sort of agreement, a written agreement that you approve.
Thank you for that. All right. Sounds like there are safeguards, there are avenues. You definitely have got the sentiment of collaborative and cooperative resolution. Bill was talking first about some threshold triggers. We talked about appeals. We're hearing that appeal process may not be it, that there already exists for agreements and placement. So, council, let's make a decision here about, has anybody heard anything that says that we need to continue this in order to get new language into an ordinance for us to review? Or are we comfortable moving forward with ordinance 19? And the way that I will test that water is I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance 19.
I'll second.
I believe you need to open up a public hearing.
Yeah, it is a
I thought I brought it back.
second reading. I don't think.
I thought I did, but maybe I didn't.
Maybe you can.
I'll just anyway. This is a public hearing on ordinance number 19, a whole bunch to do about water lines. Are there any members of the public that wish to speak about ordinance 19 this evening? Seeing, I'll bring it back to council table. Okay, my fault.
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance 19.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for ordinance 19. Further discussion. Bill.
Yeah, again, appreciate all the discussion and consideration. My request would be to put this back in staff's court to see if we can put some thresholds or trigger levels in on what triggers someone to have to replace their line. If it's discovered during a project, I suppose that's the only scenario where that applies, where it's not already known, right? And then perhaps some language regarding what happens if you become unlucky, you get notified about this, and it's either a chronological or financial hardship.
Okay, so there is a motion and a second. During discussion, Bill is saying that if this motion does not pass, that he would like to send it back, reconsider, and we'll get it to a date certain. Discussion, Ward, you had your hand up.
Yeah, a question on liens. If a lien is, as Sarah said, it's not uncommon for a municipality to put a lien on a property, that lien would be it'd be not payable until the property is sold.
Well, I think we've looked into this slightly, and I haven't looked into it recently. Works in Colorado, I think there's some time limits on it, and generally it gets treated, from a government like us, in a utility circumstance, I think it gets treated as potentially an outstanding tax debt, but then goes to tax sale. We have some control of when that gets triggered, but I think under Colorado law, I haven't done research on this in a while. It's probably been a year or two, so I can answer that question right here now. If you want more information, I can certainly come back with it. I just don't want to commit to, at this point, saying that's exactly how it works, is you get a lien and we don't get it until it sells. I think in Colorado, there's some different time frames that might apply to that.
And from our limited experience, we hold some control of when, as Kate mentioned, those triggers occur. So as a very egregious issue, we tend not to be heavy-handed to work with the customer about payment plan, et cetera, like that.
Yeah, my comfort level is sufficient with the safeguards that are built into the.
Further discussion?
How are you feeling about it?
I'm comfortable with the ability. I did actually just go through this, and they were extremely helpful. I do agree. I think there is going to come a time where somebody is going to get in a situation that they may not be ready for, but I think we are ready for that situation. I think that they know that there is going to be one of those out there, and that we will handle that. And I don't know the magnitude of it, but I know that we'll handle it. So I'm comfortable with ordinance 19. One misspelled word that's in the title of the ordinance, that word happens to Aspen. So if we can get that fixed, then I'm going to be supportive of ordinance number 19. But a ton of respect for what Bill, this is one of those areas that Bill does know a bit about, and he's got an eye on preventing some future mishap. But like I said, I think we have the coverage in the team that feels the same sentiments and has those concerns. So I'm comfortable enough. We've had a motion and a second. I'll take any further discussion and then call the question. All right. Could we have a roll call vote for ordinance number 19 with a spelling correction in the title?
Counselor Doyle?
Yes.
Counselor Guth?
No.
Counselor Howenstein?
Yes.
Counselor Rose?
Yes.
Mayor Tory?
Yes.
Good motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Could we have a roll call vote for adjournment, please?
Counselor Doyle?
Yes.
Counselor Guth?
Yes.
Counselor Howenstein?
Yes.
Counselor Rose?
Yes.
Mayor Tory?
And yes, as always, we want to say thank you to Grassroots TV, and thank you to everybody that's watching. If you're driving home after a watch party that you're at, please be safe out there. Have a good night.